Till 6:30. I think our waiting room is cleared. I'll just give it 1 second here.
Hola, muchas gracias todos por atender hoy. Vamos a hablar de la plan de reducción de emisiones en la comunidad del sureste de Los Ángeles. Y creemos que la mayoría de la gente ya no están esperando o en la sala de espera. Y ahorita vamos a empezar en unos cuantos minutos. Esperamos ir de las 5 a las 6:30.
Thank you, Liliana. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Megan Wiley. I'm with Cal State University, Sacramento. I'm providing facilitation support to CARB for this evening's meeting, which mostly means I'm the cruise director, acting as the friendly cruise director.
Megan Wiley nos está facilitando esta reunión y ella trabaja para Sacramento State Facilitators. Y ella nos va a estar dirigiendo hoy y en una manera muy amigable.
So we are interpreting this meeting in both English and Spanish. So let's first take a minute to get grounded in our personal language preferences in the Zoom interface. We'll walk you through that right now.
Esta reunión está en inglés y en español. Y primero vamos a orientarnos en nuestra preferencia del lenguaje y vamos a hacer como cómo utilizar el Zoom ahorita y en eso estamos.
Great. So at the bottom of your meeting controls, on the very right-hand side, you should see a little globe and it says interpretation. If you open that, you should have the option to select either English or Spanish for tonight's meeting.
En los controles, en la porción de abajo de su pantalla, debería ver que hay un globo y si le hace clic ahí, va a ver que inglés y español son las opciones. Y haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar.
Perfect. And if you only want to hear the interpreted language, which is Spanish, also select mute original audio.
Y si quiere solamente escuchar el lenguaje interpretado, haga clic en mute original audio para escuchar solamente el español.
Thank you to Francisco and Julie for providing interpretation to us this evening.
Muchas gracias a Francisco y Julie por proporcionar la interpretación esta noche porque ellos lo hacen mucho mejor que yo.
If anyone needs help setting that up, we're happy to provide what assistance we can if you message us in the chat. Otherwise, we're hoping for the best.
Okay. Si necesitan ayuda y no pueden seleccionar el lenguaje de interpretación, nos manda un mensaje por chat y nosotros los podemos ayudar.
Tonight's meeting is being recorded in both English and Spanish. So whether you are joining us in the English room or the Spanish virtual room, both will be recorded and recordings will be available on the CARB website shortly after the meeting.
Esta reunión está siendo grabada en español e inglés y no importa qué idioma está escuchando y la grabación va a ser, se va a poner en nuestra sitio web de CARB.
Are we ready to move to other Zoom tips?
Yeah.
Excellent. So before we get started, some of the basic Zoom tips. And Liliana, would you like me to pause or are we all set up with Francisco and Julie? Great.
We should be all set up with Francisco and Julie and they're going to take over from here.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So as you're joining us, please, of course, be sure to mute yourself unless you're speaking and you want to get into the discussion queue later. There's a couple of ways to do that. You'll see mute controls on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and you can also do it in your participant window. If you forget, no problem. There is a lot of CARB support staff on the line with us today, so we may have to mute you if there's background noise or echoing. So please, don't take that personally if we need to do that. So we'll just have common conversational courtesy. That's the biggest one in this virtual meeting space, is managing our mute and unmute, of course, when we want to get into the discussion queue. You also have the option to rename yourself, and you can do that by opening up the participant window. At the bottom of your black Zoom screen, there's a little icon with some people and it says participants. If you pop that open and you hover over your name and you right click, you can rename yourself. We want to give folks the option, because we are recording, to either name yourself with a suggested naming convention, first name, last name, and then affiliation. Or also, if you prefer to remain anonymous, you're welcome to do that as well. Also, in the bottom of your screen, in the black Zoom window, you have a chat feature, and it looks like a little conversation bubble. You can pop that out. We are encouraging use of the chat all throughout this evening's community meeting. You can use the chat to get into the discussion queue and to submit questions. We will do our best to interpret English to Spanish in the chat as fast as we can. I'll also, though, caution us to not use the chat for back and forth conversations, because that can be very slow and we probably won't get to all the interpretation in the chat in the moment. So if that starts to happen, we'll probably put a pause on that and we'll read the question out loud for the record so it can be heard by everyone in both Spanish and English. But also, please feel free to use the chat if you're having any technical difficulties. And you can chat the whole room. If you're not sure who to connect with, you can chat me, you can chat Liliana, or anybody that has CARB, the CARB affiliation after their name, and we'll happily help you as best as we can. Video is optional. I think maybe next slide. Okay, so we talked about mute and unmute. Oh yes, if you're joining us by phone this evening, you can mute with your phone's usual button, or unmute. Also *6 will do that for you as well. So *6 if you're joining us on the phone line. Video, of course, is optional, although it's really nice to see actually so many faces. This is a really impressive video turnout for a community meeting, in my opinion. But you can turn on and off your video at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Also, if you're suffering from some bandwidth issues, sometimes it can help to turn your video off if that is the case. And the video gets recorded depending on who is speaking. And you also have the option, speaking of bandwidth, if that doesn't help, you can switch to phone audio at any time. And if you need help doing that, we'll help you in the chat. The raise hand feature, so this is one of the other mechanisms we'll use to manage the discussion queue. At the bottom of your screen, if you pop out the reactions button, the little smiley face, you should see an option to raise hand. And we'll keep an eye on when hands go up. We see them on our end in the participant window for the discussion queue. And we can help you remembering to put your hands down after you've had a chance to ask your question or share your comments. And I think that's all I need to say about the raise hand feature. Folks can go ahead and give that a try if you've never been on Zoom before, although I'm sure many of us have had at least 1 or 2 Zoom meetings over the course of this last year. Chat, a few notes on chat. So all chats are archived, even if you're doing the one-on-one or private chats, just as a full disclaimer. So we tend to just try to keep conversations or comments in the group chat unless you're looking for assistance, but warning, private chats, we can also see those too on the back end once all of the meeting information is downloaded. Chat, again, we'll be using for questions, comments, feedback, and we can probably even drop some of the documents in the chat tonight as a way for folks to access, for example, the PowerPoint slide deck if you haven't had a chance to get those off of the website. So take a second, get yourself oriented with your Zoom interface. Pop open your chat window, perhaps. You can change the layout of your view if you see the PowerPoint slides and you want to see some faces. And I believe we're about ready to begin. I would please like to invite Director Deldy Reyes of the Office of Community Air Protection to provide some opening remarks for us.
Megan, thank you so much. Welcome to everyone. This is such an important milestone for the Southeast LA community. And I'm so happy to be here tonight with the Office of Community Air Protection and the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Welcome again, all of you. I hope to hear from you later this evening. We have some questions that will be structured to share some feedback with us. And really, I also just want to note, how hard this has been. This is a year beyond all years in terms of the challenges all of us have faced. Our frustration and with Zoom is but a tiny little, symptom of what we have all been dealing with: the global pandemic, the impacts on our lives, our families, the economy. And so the fact that this group was able to continue its important work and develop a community emissions reduction plan, it's really something to be celebrated. I hope that you all feel excited about the work going forward, because we're now soon to be entering the implementation phase. But before we do that, we want to go through this step of the process. And what that is about is really just creating an opportunity for you all to share with us directly at CARB any feedback that you have. We also are interested, beyond the SERP itself, things that you felt worked well in this process. One of the roles that CARB plays is to lift up good practices from across the different community steering committees in the state. We now have 15. And part of what we need to do is share those across all of the air districts so that we can all help learn from each other. So that is partly why you will see later this evening some poll questions that we hope will share some feedback from you all. So just as a little bit of history, the South Coast Board adopted the SERP, the Community Emissions Reduction Plan, in December. And where we are now is getting ready for taking that plan to our own board at CARB in May. And so it will be heard on May 20th. And so we have plenty of time to have this conversation and consider your input and feedback. We will have a chance to hear shortly from South Coast, where they will present an overview of the plan and share some highlights. And as I said, we also will have some poll questions. We will be using the poll feature in Zoom. So again, very grateful to Megan for supporting us and helping us out with the Zoom. Let's see. I think that should just about do it. Anything else that I missed, Karen or Dave? No? All right. Let's take it away then.
I think we first want to start with an easy poll so that we're interactive, and it's meant as a little bit of an icebreaker, and it's helpful for all the CARB staff to understand who is in the room, who is attending today's workshop. And I will say there's an impressive amount of CARB staff joining us today, about 15 or 18 CARB staff on the line, which is fantastic. So I'm about to launch the poll from my end. We'll talk through, there's two questions actually. It's a two-part poll. If you're joining us by phone, we're so sorry you can't join us. You can't do the poll with us. There's no translation onto the polling feature unless you're logged in on an iPhone, then maybe you can, or an Android or smartphone. But not to worry, the polls are meant to be fun. They're non-binding. They're just kind of for initial feedback, right? So the first question, we would like to know how many years you've lived or worked in the Southeast Los Angeles community. 0 to 5, 6 to 10, over a decade, more than 20, or you don't live in the community. And part two of the question is, where do you live or work in the community? Southgate, Florence Firestone, Walnut Park, Huntington Park, Cudahy, Bell Gardens, or you don't live or work in the community. So here comes the poll. It should pop up on your screen. Looks like there's about 57 folks joining us who could participate in the poll. Zoom's excellent like that, so that who is joining us as a co-host, our CARB staff, they can't respond, so it's just community members responding. Don't forget to answer both questions 1 and 2. You might need to scroll through. looks like we're at about 45% of folks who've decided to participate. Let's give it another 5 seconds or so. Okay, final countdown. You want to play along? 4, 3, 2. Okay, I'm going to show the results. Looks like we got a handful of folks who have lived in the community for 0 to 5 years, another 1 or 2 people who have much longer residence, and a lot of folks joining us who don't live or work in the community. So maybe you're all learning, looking to learn from this community's process and apply it to your own. Couple of folks from Southgate, 1 person from Florence Firestone, Huntington Park. Great. Okay, let's go to our second poll. Oh, that was a second poll. Sorry about that. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next bit. Agenda review, very simple for this evening. We're here together for about an hour and a half. We've got an hour and 15 minutes left. Carb has a couple slides for you. Oh, sorry, Liliana. Oh, are we going to poll 2?
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Okay, sorry, going back to poll 2, forget everything I just said about the agenda. It's not important. Polling is way more fun. So poll 2, the SERP addresses the following emission sources. SERP is the Community Emissions Reduction Plan. Of these following sources, which do you feel most impacts you or the community and is your top priority? Truck traffic and freeways, rendering facilities, lack of green spaces, metal processing facilities, rail yards and locomotives, or general industrial. Here comes your poll. And if none of these is what your top concern is, feel free to comment further in the chat box. And you can also send additional thoughts or comments to communityair@arb.ca.gov. So if folks joining us by phone want to provide feedback on this important question, you can always email your responses to us, communityairb.ca.gov. It's interesting bits of data, and all of this is being considered by CARB staff. All of it will feed into their drafting of staff reports and also inform the program itself. All of tonight's conversations, including these little fun poll exercises that we're doing. We got about 18 responses. Let's give it another 5 seconds. Okay. Share the results here. Almost half of the respondents are most concerned about truck traffic and freeways. A couple folks, lack of green spaces, metal processing facilities, railroads, locomotives, general industrial. Excellent. Okay, back to the agenda review. So coming up next, we have a brief presentation by CARB staff where they'll review their review process, about 6 or 7 slides or so. Then we have 3 more quick poll questions for you. And really the focus of tonight's meeting is to hear from you all. So it's about 45 to 60 minutes of Q&A and open discussion and a chance for you all to engage with CARB staff. That's the primary reason we're here today. So easy breezy, I would like to now introduce Liliana to give a presentation.
Unmute. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks, Megan, for the intro. I'm Liliana Nunez. I work in the Office of Community Air Protection. Thanks for joining us again. So I'm going to start by providing an overview of the statewide community air protection program. Many of you are likely pretty familiar with the program, but just in case, I'll cover some quick details. In 2017, the California legislature passed Assembly Bill 617, which was designated to improve air quality at the community level through partnerships with community members, specifically focusing on those communities across the state that are disproportionately impacted by air pollution. CARB established the Community Air Protection Program to implement this legislation. And there are many different components to this program, including new statewide and regional emission reduction strategies. Those are actions like regulations to limit emissions and incentive funding for cleaner technologies. A suite of new databases and enhanced emissions reporting requirements to support these emission reduction efforts. Community-focused plans to reduce air pollution. In the legislation, these are known as community emissions reduction programs. And finally, new local efforts to measure exposure to air pollution in the form of community air monitoring. These elements combined are designed to bring cleaner air to the communities most impacted by air pollution in California. So one of the things that makes AB 617 and the Community Air Protection Program different from other air quality programs is that it focuses on communities, community partnerships, and cumulative exposure to air pollution. In many communities, there are a variety of emission sources, and all of their emissions combined can result in levels of air pollution that are too high, and this is what we call cumulative exposure. And in many of these same communities, emission sources are too close to where people live, work, and play, which exacerbates exposure issues. So why did we ask you to join us here tonight? Under AB 617, all community emission reduction programs in the state go through the same process that's outlined in statute. After a community is selected, the Air District has 1 year to build a community steering committee, work with the steering committee to develop a community emissions reduction program, and have it adopted by the local Air District Board. So once a plan is adopted by the local Air District Board, AB 617 requires the plan be submitted to CARB for our board to take action by considering the plan for approval, followed by implementation and annual reporting. The South Coast Air Quality Management District Board approved this plan for Southeast LA on December 4th, 2020, which means the next step is that it comes to our board for consideration. And community engagement is a key piece of all of these efforts. So we're here tonight to hear directly from you about the plan. I'm going to turn over the next portion of the presentation to Dr. Diane Sanchez from South Coast AQMD to provide an overview of the plan.
Awesome. Thank you, Liliana. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the South Coast AQMD's development of the Community Emission Reduction Plan. But the first thing I want to say is that this plan wouldn't have been possible without all of the help and the hard work from our Community Steering Committee. So I'm going to start with that, talking about our Community Steering Committee, or our CSC. And so what we did at the beginning of 2020 is we presented a charter to our potential CSC, which identified what that committee's goals, roles, and responsibilities would be, as well as the membership process. And so what we ended up having were 39 members of the community who joined our CSC. And these 39 members were composed of a majority of active residents who lived in the community, also representatives from different businesses, from local government agencies, or even different community organizations, businesses, etc. So it was really a big group of community stakeholders that made up these 39 folks. And so what we did is create this plan with the guidance of the CSC. And we would receive the input from these community members through our Community Steering Committee meetings. And we held about 9 of these meetings between January and November of 2020. And that's where we received input on what exactly were the concerns of the community and what specifically do they see through their own experience living in the community or working in that community. And in addition to that, we also did some additional outreach where we would hear from our steering committee through one-on-one meetings, for example, over the phone or over Zoom, where we would hash out some of the ideas a bit more. So not only would we hear a little bit more details about their concerns, but we would also hear their ideas on how to address those concerns. And we could really hash it out in those one-on-one meetings in a way that we might not be able to during those community steering committee meetings that were, had some limited time. And in addition to that, we also had some technical advisory group meetings that we had during that time. And what these would typically involve would be more technical information for those who wanted a more technical view of the process behind the SERP and the community air monitoring plan as well. So this might be information on source attribution data or source attribution methodology, community air monitoring, instrumentation, etc. And so after this year of hard work on behalf of our CSC, we went ahead and presented our finalized community emission reduction plan to the South Coast AQMD board, which they adopted in December of 2020. Next slide, please. All right, and so here you see a quick overview of what that emission reduction plan entailed. So on the left, you see the different air quality priorities that were mentioned earlier that were included in that poll. So the CSC identified their top 6 concerns, and those again were truck traffic and freeways, rail yards and locomotives, general industrial facilities, increasing green space in the SELA community, rendering facilities, and metal processing facilities. And so what we did once we identified those top concerns is we addressed what the specific concerns were regarding each air quality priority and figured out what would be the best strategy to address it. So for example, that might be additional rules and regulations. So for metal processing facilities, for example, we have committed to initiating the rule development process for best management practices and housekeeping related to metal recycling facilities. And that will help address the concern that we heard around the fugitive emissions from these type of facilities. Another thing would be a focused enforcement in the community where the CSC tells us that they might see some bad actors, for example. We have strategies like air monitoring, collaborating with other, for example, nonprofits or other local government agencies who might have different jurisdictions than we do, providing incentive funding, and providing the public some information or outreach as well. And so with these different strategies, we would then hopefully reach the goal of reducing emissions of NOx and diesel particulate matter in the SELA community. Next slide, please. And so here we have an overview of our emission reduction targets. So this is what we hope to achieve with our actions and the strategies that we presented in that slide that you just saw. And so if you take a look at this graph on the right-hand side, you see on the horizontal axis the years of 2018, 2025, and 2030. And what you're seeing is the amount or the tons per year of diesel particulate matter. And so we use 2018 as our baseline year, where you see roughly about 36 tons per year of diesel particulate matter in this community. But with the implementation of our SERP, we hope that by 2025, we would have reduced that initial amount of DPM by about 58%. So then we would be at about 16 tons per year of diesel particulate matter. And then in 2030, we would reduce it to a total of 69% from the 2018 baseline year. And so we really wanted to highlight the diesel particulate matter emission reductions, as DPM is an air toxic that has cancer risk associated with it. So reducing this in the community is really important and very impactful. And so that's our brief overview of the Southeast LA Community Emission Reduction Plan. So I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Diane. So as I mentioned earlier, the plans has been submitted to CARB for review, and CARB staff's review will be released in a staff report. And what we hear from you tonight will inform our review and the staff report. The report is scheduled to be released later this month, followed by a public comment period. Then on May 20th, there will be a public hearing and our board will consider approval of the South Los Angeles Community Emission Reduction Plan. And though we're not exactly sure what time the board item will be heard, there is one item currently scheduled to be considered before ours, or before this one, that will start no later than 4 p.m. So please check the link in the slide 10 days prior to the board hearing to verify the order of the agenda items. So with that, we have a couple of additional survey questions followed by some discussion. As Megan mentioned, we want to talk through with you and to help us inform our staff report and implementation of the plan and the program in general. So I'll turn it over to Megan now.
And this is Dave Saladino with CARB. Just before we turn it over to Megan, just a clarification. The item on May 20th will start no earlier than 4 p.m. we always mess that up. So no earlier than 4 p.m. But as Liliana mentioned, there is another item that will start at 4 o'clock. So there will be one item prior to the Southeast LA CERP going to our board.
Thank you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dave. And I do see a couple of comments coming in through chat. Rhodey, I see your submissions there, and I want to bring those into the conversation right after we go through these next 3 quick polls. So this one is, we've transitioned to a virtual meeting space for over a year now. And as Director Reyes was talking about in the beginning, people have done a tremendous job and have continued to do good work and have pushed forward with the development of this plan. But that's what CARB staff thinks, but what do you all think, right? CARB wants to know, how well do you all feel that they did in the transition to this virtual meeting space? Excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? The symphony of dogs barking outside, I apologize. We'll give this a couple of more seconds. Folks care to respond. Five more seconds. Okay, I'm sure the results. Looks like a lot of folks said excellent or very good. A couple of folks suggested good or fair, which is excellent feedback because we're always looking for ways to improve. So maybe when we get into the discussion portion of the evening, if you have ideas for improvements, because I imagine there'll be some type of a hybrid over the next unforeseeable future of virtual meeting spaces and in-person meeting spaces as we transition back to so-called normal life, help us understand what we can do better. Let's go to the next poll. CARB recognizes that the CERP process is time consuming. It takes a lot of conversations, a lot of energy to develop one of these big plans in such a short period of time. CARB is continually working with communities in the air districts to make the process as efficient and complete as possible. In your opinion, did the CERP process meet the overall expectations you had when the first process started? Here comes your poll. Completely met your expectations? Mostly? Somewhat? Very little? Not at all. And these are just how you feel. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no criteria for response. And you may not understand why you feel a certain way, and that's totally fine. We'll give folks a few more seconds. Five seconds. Okay, let's share the results of this one. So a couple of folks thought the SERP process met all of their expectations, or mostly met their expectations. A couple people thought somewhat or very little. Also, excellent data, and hopefully folks who were responding to our polls are compelled to share a little bit more detail after we move into the discussion period. Okay, we have one more poll for you. CARB is interested in areas where we can provide more information to help during the SERP and the CAMP, the Community Air Monitoring Plan development process. Please choose the top 2 topics for which you would have liked more information during the development process. So for this poll, it's a multiple choice. You can select 2, or you can select 1. Emissions inventory, air pollution sources, existing rules, enforcement, health impacts. Great, we've got some results coming in. Maybe a few more people are interested to respond to this one. Give you a few more seconds. Couple more seconds and we'll close out here. Okay, let's share the results of this one. Pretty spaced out across emissions inventory, air pollution sources, health impacts. It seems like most folks might be pretty familiar with existing rules, and a couple of folks are interested in some more information on enforcement. Thanks, everyone. Oh, we have 6 polls. My apologies. The 6th poll. CARB's committed to building stronger relations with the community. How satisfied are you with the existing relationship between the community and CARB? So I know in our first poll, a number of folks responded that you're actually not from the SELA community, from the Southeast Los Angeles community. But if you're thinking about your perspective, your opinion on CARB's relationship with the Southeast Los Angeles community, that's what we're interested to get feedback on. Are you satisfied, very satisfied, dissatisfied, fair? Okay, a couple more seconds on this one. Looks like results are slowing down. I'm going to go ahead and end and share this one. All right, most folks are satisfied, very satisfied. A couple responded fair or dissatisfied. Again, thank you for your feedback, and we're looking to dive deeper into all of these responses, starting pretty much now. I'd say. Okay, so we're moving into our discussion period. We've got just under an hour budgeted for this, which is an excellent amount of time. We have 2 prompting questions. Of course, responses are not limited to these discussion questions only. So I'm going to read these to start and then give folks a minute or two to just silently think about the answers. And hopefully our little polling activity was also helping to get some ideas going and get some thoughts flowing on the feedback that you would like to give CARB staff here today. So our first prompting question is, what would you like CARB's governing board to know about the community emissions reduction plan for Southeast Los Angeles? And secondly, what lessons learned would you like us to share with other communities or CARB's governing board? So we're going to be quiet here for about 60 seconds and let you reflect, maybe jot down some notes, and then we will open up the discussion queue. Okay, as we're thinking about that, I just wanted to remind folks ways to enter the discussion queue. You can use your raised hand feature, which is under the reactions little icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're on the phone and you want to raise your hand, it's *9 for that. You can also put your name in the chat and I'll keep the queue over here. And if all else fails, turn on your video and flag us down. So let's start with Rodi offered a few thoughts in the chat feature. I will do my best to bring these into conversation, and if it starts to get popular, I'll ask my colleagues Liliana and Laura to help me monitor that. We want to bring what is in the chat box into the discussion because the folks who are in the Spanish room don't necessarily have access to all of these, and we want to make sure everything's heard by everyone, which is why we're doing it that way. So I believe I'm scrolling back to the top here. Rodi asked a question about refineries in the emissions list, and that was in response to the polling, the second poll we asked about folks' top concerns about emissions in the region. And so he suggested that refineries are one of the worst emission sources in these communities. Dave Saladrino from CARB offered that refineries were not included in the survey question, poll number 2, since it was not included as a priority emission source concern in the SELA Community Emissions Reduction Plan. But that's a concern of a community member, so now it's brought to CARB's awareness. Doesn't mean it can't be addressed in future updates or shouldn't be addressed now. Rodi also asks, what steps will be taken to get reduction in 2025? I suggest you also add new rules to get to 2025 and 2030 targets. I do know that CARB staff is interested to respond to the questions or comments that they have information enough to respond to at this time. So I'll leave it to CARB staff to direct me on if you would prefer to issue a response to some of these questions or comments, or if we should continue on with our discussion queue.
Megan, actually, and I saw Diane Sanchez's hand was up, and I think she's ready to respond to the refineries question and the, go ahead.
Great.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Rodi, for your statement. And so I just wanted to clarify a little bit more about the process in which the community chose their top air quality concerns, just so that you're aware. And so after presenting some of the emission source material to the CSC members, we did an activity where we had the CSC decide what their top priorities were. So we actually had split everyone into groups and then had the groups discuss amongst themselves what their concerns were. And we actually, this was before COVID, so we did this in person, and every group had like easels, and they wrote down their concerns and presented it back to the South Coast AQMD and CARB staff. And so after we tallied and took a look at what the concerns were, we ended up with the 6 top concerns that we had presented earlier. Number 1, which was definitely trucks. We kept hearing truck traffic in freeways over and over again. And so that's why refineries didn't make the cut. One of my teammates can jump in if they'd like, but I don't recall refineries being called out specifically at all in like the top concerns. There were a couple of specific facilities that were called out that do have some like petroleum type processes, but no refineries specifically were called out. I don't believe there are large refineries in the Southeast LA community, at least not the boundary that we have outlined, except for one facility, like I said, that does have some petroleum processes there. So I just wanted to clarify on that. I hope that helps.
And Diane, thank you for that. This is Dave Salvino Carbon. Just want to add that obviously there are communities that are surrounding this area that refineries probably are one of the major concerns, and the Wilmington, Carson, West Long Beach area definitely is one of those. And that obviously was a community that was previously selected and it has already had a CERT community emission reduction program that was adopted by South Coast Governing Board as well as approved by our board last year as well. Or I guess actually, last year? Yeah, last year.
Thanks, Dave. Also, I will apologize in advance if I mispronounce names. It's bound to happen. I think maybe I already mispronounced one, so my apologies. Mark Roast, would you love to jump in the queue? Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. It's Roost like Shore Canoe, and if you do a full court press and finance enough solar to power both buildings and all the vehicles associated with them, together with the stationary batteries, chargers, and energy management system to support that, and you underwrite and subsidize purchases of battery electric vehicles as well as the infrastructure, it'll galvanize the economy while helping to eliminate fossil fuels by 2030. You also might want to have the people that did the pro bono analysis of the new Apollo program, which came out in 2000, and was run by Kate Gordon. I mean, she's the one who initiated it. You might look at taking what she pioneered back then and all the possibilities we have now and combining them and doing the people in the getting an outcomes research. I mean, a econometric input output analysis done by the people in El Paso, Texas, that did a pro bono evaluation of what she wrote, or what she and the people that she gathered together put together. Is the even in 2000 with prices what they were, that program was going to be very profitable as well as having millions of jobs. Now it would be far more so because the costs have gone down so much. Along with that, I would request that you guys start looking again at new breakthrough technologies, whether they're in construction, energy, or transportation. There are some breakthroughs that I'm associated with either directly or as an advisor, and would like to see those things get some traction.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Lynn offered in the chat a link to carb pollution mapping tool to find emission sources in the community with a couple of instructions. I'm not sure we can do real-time translation of this for our Spanish language room, but we can copy the link over there and let folks know the link is for the carb pollution mapping tool. Sasha, would you like to go?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sasha. I want to answer question number 1 for discussion. I know that technology is evolving pretty fast. Is there other things we can use? Is there new technology that we can use while we're doing the air pollution study?
Looks like Mark is interested to respond after Dave.
I'm sorry. I guess maybe Mark should respond. I wasn't quite sure. Are you asking if there's new technology to do air pollution studies that can be? Because as part of this program, not as part of the emission reduction program that we're necessarily here talking about today, but as part of the selection of this community, the Air District worked with the community to also, as you probably know, develop the monitoring plan as well. So there definitely is air monitoring that is going on within this community as part of this program in general, not necessarily, well, I guess it feeds into the emission reduction program that we're here talking about today, but there is a separate plan for that as well.
Thanks. I might move to Diane because I think maybe you want to respond to this, Diane.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I want to respond to both Sasha and Mark. So in addition to what Dave said, where we have our community air monitoring plan, we also do have actions in our SERP that our community helped develop, which include actions that would have us look for incentive funding for infrastructure that includes alternative energy. So that could be EV, that could be other types of technology. So that's definitely in our plan currently. Specifically, I believe it was for rail yards and locomotives. We're also, we have actions under the truck traffic and freeway section where we're looking for like class 8 zero emission trucks, for example. And so those are actions we are currently working on during this year of implementation. So I just wanted to mention that. So I definitely appreciate both of your comments.
Thank you. Edith Marino from the Community Steering Committee. Would you like to jump in?
Yes, thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. My name is Edith. I am a Community Steering Committee member for the Southeast Los Angeles community. I grew up in Southgate, born and raised. I don't live there anymore, but I do represent the CSC on behalf of the Southern California Gas Company. So just to directly add to this discussion here, for questions 1 and 2 is, as we all know, AB 617 was passed to address criteria air pollutants and air toxics specifically. And so I think what I would like the CARB board to know is that the air districts are really have a very strict timeline on what they need to do to meet the requirements of statute. And I'm not sure if there is an opportunity to potentially amend the statute. I don't think there's enough time this year, but possibly next year. And maybe I say that this year because I think the deadline to introduce bills and make any changes to pass legislation has just passed. But I think this is something that CARB should possibly consider. As more communities come online, the air districts are only going to be more and more constrained. And so that's one. And an additional lesson learned is because the process is so rushed, there really wasn't adequate enough opportunity for us to do more kind of like exercises of who's in the room, right? Have an opportunity for various members of the steering committee to get to know each other a little bit more. I know COVID hit us, but I feel like there could have been more opportunities at the air districts for community members to learn a little bit more about each other, and that'll just only strengthen the relationship that we've developed over the course of a year now. And again, this is more, I'm really grateful and thankful for all of the work that AQMD staff has done on putting the SERP together. They were under a really tight timeline we're addressing all of the demands of the CSC members. And so I'm not sure if, again, their hands are tied because they have a legislative timeline to meet. But I think it's important to hopefully bring that to the board's attention if there's a possibility to make some sort of amendments on their requirements. Again, and this is not to delay any sort of process or progress in emissions reductions. I think that the engagement with the community should continue early on, but there should just be a little bit more time for AQMD staff to work with the CSC to put this together. That's it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Edith. Ken offers in the chat, or asks rather, what role does hydrogen play in your plans? Fuel cell electric vehicles are zero emissions. Diane, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Thank you, Ken, for your question. So in our truck section, our truck traffic and freeway section of our community emission reduction plan, we do have an action that specifically calls out fuel cells. The action is we commit to conducting outreach to the community whenever there are opportunities for incentive funding where we can replace older, more polluting trucks with cleaner technology. And we specifically call out fuel cells or other types of alternative energy that these older, more polluting trucks can be replaced with. So yes, fuel cells do play a role in our SERP, and they're explicitly written in.
Thank you. Maybe if there are other steering committee members who have joined us, they are interested to build off of Edith's comments and offer some lessons learned from their experience in developing the SERP. And any other thoughts, comments, questions are welcome. Not to worry, we're not afraid of awkward silence. So we can wait. Sasha, please go ahead.
Hi, I actually have a question. I'm new to this air quality thing, and so I was wondering, what is the timeline? When does it start and when does it end? And how long for a period does it go before it has to go to the board?
Let me find, it takes me a while to find the unmute button. Let's see. So once a community is selected by our CARB board, the Air District has 1 year from that date of selection to convene a community steering committee and to develop the community emissions reduction program. And then in that time, the South Coast AQMD board or any local air district board has to adopt the SERP that was developed with the community. And then once they submit it to CARB, we go through our review process that includes review of the actual SERP. It includes this type of community engagement, like a public meeting to get your specific thoughts about the community emission reduction plan, and then we take it to our board. So here is the timeline that this specific community emission reduction plan has followed.
Thanks, Liliana. It's a lot of work to accomplish in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I said it like way too quickly for to reflect just how much work actually went into it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and if folks haven't seen the comprehensive plan or have forgotten how to access that, can someone from CARB pop that into the chat box, the link to the SELA SERP?
I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you. We had a polling question about virtual community engagement. And since you're all here, you understand how important that public engagement, stakeholder community engagement piece is. And some folks responded that there's room for improvement. So curious if anybody can offer suggestions on how we can improve that particular piece. Maybe it's the timing of meetings, maybe it's it's the frequency of meetings or the content that's shared. Sometimes it's hard also to have that interaction when we're in a virtual space, which is why we're attempting some of that with the polling. But any ideas there are also welcome. Okay. Also, we had a polling question about the relationship between the community and CARB staff who works in the area, and how CARB staff is engaged in the Southeast Los Angeles community. Just wondering if anybody wants to give any feedback or responses there, things that they really appreciate that CARB staff does, or again, areas for improvement. I can also pull us back to polling question number 5, where we asked if we had more time and you could have received more information from CARB, what would you like information on? And this was kind of across the board: emissions inventory, air pollution, health impacts, and enforcement. I'm wondering if folks have specific questions or areas where they would like more information on, maybe specific to emissions inventory or health impacts, and how we could facilitate a little bit more of that information exchange. Edith, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I actually checked the emissions inventory box on this, and I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the reason why I selected that. And I think I made it made it to the Southeast LA SERP, but I know CARB staff is heavily involved in the additional reporting requirement that AB 617 has for air toxics and facilities. I feel like that piece of AB 617 was missing in terms of educating the community on that piece of or that side of AB 617, right? And the additional reporting for air toxics in these communities. So I think that's why I chose emission inventory. And I know in our Southeast LA SERP, I think we have a requirement where CARB is supposed to work with the air districts to put together an annual community workshop to educate the community on the data that is collected from the new reporting regulations. And so yeah, so I think that's it. I just wanted to elaborate and share my thoughts on why I checked the emissions inventory checkbox.
Thanks, Edith. And I think that it was included in the SERP because of your comments. So we really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
If there's anyone joining us who's interested to share from a different community, which we know there are, from polling question number 1, maybe you're interested to tell us why you decided to join us this evening and what you were hoping to learn. And maybe you're working on some emissions reductions plans for your community, or you're hoping to have some lessons learned. Maybe you have questions for the steering committee members. Sasha.
Hi, yes, I do. The reason why I joined this meeting is because I wanted to take part in community, participate in community, and get a better understanding how our community is affected with the air pollution. Also, I want to make a big difference and make change, and if there needs to be changes done or suggest changes, that would be possible.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Other than our prompting questions, oh, Liliana, did you want to jump in?
I was just gonna say, and if there's anything, any information specifically that you'd like to help you in this journey where you're, participating in community stuff, you have my email and you could just reach out to me, and then I hope to be helpful.
Thank you.
Mark, thanks for your next comment. Did you want to go ahead and read that for the record?
Sure, thank you. There was a study that I saw 2 or 3 years old or more of the drayage fleet, and it talked about, 18,000 vehicles, including about 6,000 that were pre 2009 or earlier engine model year. And I'd like to see that study updated and expanded to analyze what it would take to provide enough solar energy, stationary batteries, and charging capacity to convert the fleet by 2030. I'd like to help brainstorm strategies for enabling fleets who cannot install infrastructure at their depots. That kind of information is hard to get for startups like us. So we're between us and our allies, we can do solar infrastructure, stationary charging, batteries for vehicles, and even replacements for neodymium to make motor magnets. Mark Roos from San Mateo, California, and the company is Sustainable Energy, Inc.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm not too well versed on the upcoming Advanced Clean Fleets rule that our Transportation and Toxics division is developing right now. But maybe I can provide you some links or get you connected with some of our transportation and toxic.
That would be
staff.
wonderful. That would be wonderful. You already have my identity, my contact information from the registration?
I'm not possibly, but I wouldn't know for sure, actually.
So, right.
I think it's an open
can-
meeting, Mark. So if you wanted to privately message Liliana with your email, she can
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah, I'm about to do that.
Great.
Great.
Okay.
Alternatively, I can also add my email to the chat. And you can email me.
Did our last slide, Liliana, have your contact information on there as well?
Yes. Wow.
Look at that.
I I just went 0 to 100. Yeah, let me pull that up again.
Great. And then I will read this next question comment from Ken. How are you incorporating economic rate impacts on residents to all of the proposed changes? All of the solutions are great, but they need to balance those solutions against what residents would have to pay to deploy them.
So this is Dave. I can kind of start off on this question, and I don't know if Dan has wants to add anything afterwards. But so again, this is David at CARB. So with regards to the economics of both, obviously there are within the strategies themselves, there are certain actions that are sort of regulatory in nature, and they are not developed. They are not fully developed within the emission reduction program itself. Those are actions that will have to be taken. They are committed to within the program, but they will have to be taken actual actions outside of that program. And during the development of those regulations and things of that nature, that's when the economic analyses are done for those specific items themselves. So thank you, Ken, for that question.
Thanks, Dave. Also on the contact us slide that Liliana just pulled up, that last email, the program email, communityair@arb.ca.gov. If after the meeting you have more ideas or questions or comments you want to submit, or you're interested to respond and provide your feedback to our polling prompts, this is the email that you would use. So please, after the meeting, if you have some additional thoughts, comments, ideas to share, feel free to send them in over email as well. Okay, question from Barry in the chat. A question for someone from CARB to address. Are the emission reductions described at the beginning, are these goals incremental to other statewide and regional emission reductions from other actions already in place or underway?
So I'll start with this question and then turn it over to Diane. I think this includes some of our CARB regulations, and actually Diane is better first to
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Liliana, you're absolutely right. So this graph, so I'll just explain it a little bit more. So the 2018 emissions here are the tons per year of diesel particulate matter, and that's like our baseline, right? And so what's projected to be, be emitting in 2025 and 2030 is as a consequence of CARB and South Coast EQMD rules that we currently have in the books. And so, yes, if I read your question correctly, then these are things that are underway. I do want to point out that this does not include emission reductions from incentive projects, for example, which the SELA community is currently discussing, as we do have incentive funds currently. And so you can think of this as like we should at least get these emission reductions, but we can potentially get even more once we include those incentive projects. But yes, as it stands, these reductions that are projected are as a consequence of the CARB rules and regulations that are underway, and as they start to be adopted. I hope that helps.
If I can just ask a question, I might fumble through this a little bit, but to build on what you were just talking through, Diane. So the SERP gets adopted by CARB's board, and then there's these emission reductions targets, and it looks like it's at 5-year increments. What opportunity is there to adjust the plan to make it more of like a living plan or implement some course corrections to meet these targets if needed?
Yeah, I'll let Liliana answer that question in regards to the adjustments to the plan. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so we do consider the SERPs living documents, and a lot of what air districts do and what we recommend is that the air districts during implementation work with the CSC to figure out really what their priorities are if they've shifted during implementation, because these are 5-year programs. And like you said, do some course correcting during that time. So it's really still a collaborative process with the CSC and a living document already.
Thank you. Crystal and Chandan were offering a couple of links in the chat in response to the conversation we were having with Mark a few minutes ago. So I just wanted to announce those for the folks joining us in the Spanish room. Crystal says that Mark might consider talking with the CARB TTD folks directly at their upcoming listening session on April 27th. She provided a link for that, for the air toxics regulatory process and community input listening session. And then she also said that CARB's just beginning its advanced Clean Car 2 rulemaking process. There should be a workshop coming up later this spring. And Crystal's available to chat. She gave her email if folks are interested to speak with her directly about that. And Chandan also provided a link to the Advanced Clean Fleets CARB webpage, including the recent presentations. So those are the two most recent links that were just shared in the chat box. anyone joining us from CARB have specific questions for our community members or CSC members joining us tonight?
This is Dave, and I'll just add. I know there was the question, and Megan went over it again a little while ago about sort of the topics for which maybe folks might have wanted more information on during the process for the emission reduction development. And obviously, we included in there the topics kind of we thought that were most pertinent to the emission reduction, but we may have missed some. So if there were others as well, feel free to either mention them now or put them in the chat for us as well.
I have one too, Megan.
Okay.
Hi, this is Karen Buckley. I'm with CARB. And what I want to know, I know we talked a little bit about switching over to virtual meetings. And now that we've all been kind of doing these for a year, I wanted to know from the group how they felt about continuing to do virtual meetings. Say we were all vaccinated and we could all go out and be together again. Is in-person meetings preferred? Is virtual meetings preferred, or is hybrid, which is probably what it will be? I was just wondering if it's easier for people to participate more often when there's a virtual option.
Good question. So many people considering that every day. Edith thinks hybrid, Ken thinks in person. I mean, it's more cost effective to meet virtually in terms of travel time and staff time and venue. And sometimes you can increase participation, but then you absolutely miss that personal connection and the nuances and sometimes that collaborative environment. It's easier to get stuff done when you're in the room together. And you're not tempted to scroll through Pinterest in the background. Not saying that I ever do that. Couple of votes for hybrid.
I was gonna say, I feel like that after meeting kind of I guess ambiance, or just like after the CSC meetings, just talking to people, whether it's South Coast AQMD staff or community members. For me, I really missed that this year and in this community. But I'd still say hybrid.
But it builds off what Edith was mentioning earlier about sort of for the CSC meetings, the team building within the CSC, much tougher to do obviously in a virtual environment than it even is to be when you're in an in-person environment like that.
Right, every community is different. So I think this is a question we'll keep putting forward for ourselves and adapting as we move along. Crystal, a question for the group. It would be great to understand what additional information the community would like presented on enforcement. From CARB's Enforcement Liaison, Crystal. Anyone want to offer some thoughts for Crystal's?
I would.
Go ahead.
So if I've learned in talking to people in the Port of Oakland, I've learned that the cash flow is a real issue for a lot of truckers. And so if, and also the communication isn't out there that much, but what we should be doing is a conversion program so people don't have to have the money to buy new trucks, but they can convert the old trucks, and by putting up enough solar, after a while it'll pay for itself and the fuel will be free. And they'll even be able to compete once the autonomous trucks get started, because those will be new trucks with new equipment and high amortization. They won't have the driver cost, but an old truck that's fully amortized and almost free to operate can support the driver. And that is a multiple win for disadvantaged communities. And with our batteries, within a couple of years, we should be able to really slash the cost of doing those conversions.
Is there a connected question there for enforcement, Mark?
Yeah, is there a way that enforcement could include communicating, finding out where people stand without making them feel bad, but just find out who might be a candidate for financial support in doing something, that they wouldn't even know about because they wouldn't be shopping for a truck. But if someone said, well, if you turn this truck into a battery electric truck and you focus on short runs, or later on when the batteries are much better, twice or 3 times as good as they are now on any runs, then could be a way of having something that could be enforcement that could be onerous turn into a benefit. That's how I think about that.
Thanks for your input, Mark.
You're welcome.
And Ken also agrees. He agreed in the chat box saying batteries and fuel cell electric technologies incentivize the purchase of trucks, and the fueling infrastructure will come.
Conversion is a lot cheaper though.
We've got about 7 minutes left. Floor is open to anybody who has questions, comments, ideas to share. Oh, I see a hand up. Sasha.
Hi, actually, I wanted a little bit more explanation about, you have a goals and deadlines? And I know what happens if we don't meet that percentage mark by that year?
So this is David, and I'll help respond to that. So they are goals within the emission reduction program itself, and there are within the plan itself. There's also metrics for tracking the progress towards meeting those goals. So as the program goes along, and this is the idea for the plan is that the actions will be completed in the first 5 years of the program, and we should be seeing those benefits within the first 10 years of the program from those actions. So as the program is going along, there will be metrics to sort of track that progress. And the steering committees themselves are still meeting on a regular basis. They meet at least quarterly. This first quarter, they're even meeting quite a few times more than that for this community. So as that goes along, those metrics will be discussed with the steering committee as well. And then, as mentioned earlier, if there are course corrections that need to be made, those can be discussed at that time with the steering committee. And Diane, if you have anything to add to that, feel free to. So.
Yeah, I think you got it, Dave. But so I believe Liliana and another one of the CARB members had put a link to our SERP in the chat. And if you take a look, you can see those metrics of progress that Dave mentioned, specifically in Chapter 5. So Chapter 5 is broken up into each one of the categories, which is there's one for trucks, one for rendering facilities, like each one of those main concerns from this community. And in each one of those sections, there's a table with an action and then a metric for progress as well as a timeline. So even though, there's 5 years to implement this plan, we have smaller deadlines and smaller metrics for progress that we're aiming to meet. And that's what these quarterly meetings now in implementation are all about, where we're updating the CSC on what we're doing to meet those targets and, getting their input on anything that we need along the way. Such as if they say, hey, we want to reduce exposure with school air filtration systems, we might have a meeting where we talk about what type of criteria we're going to use to prioritize those schools for exposure reduction, or where should we look for truck idling? Where can we do that type of enforcement? So we're definitely we have that to what is it called, to kind of keep us on track, if you will. And annual reports to CARB where we talk about that progress that we're making every year.
Thanks. And in the chat, we just put a link to today's slide deck, and then also the link to the community page for the Southeast Los Angeles community. And then thirdly, the link to the SERP once again. So we have a few minutes left. We can also pull up the contact slide again, and then I'll just point out the email address, communityair, all one word, at arb.ca.gov. If you have additional thoughts on things that you want CARB's board to know about this particular SERP, things you want CARB's board to know about the SERP process itself. And again, everything that we've talked about here today, and then everything that gets submitted to the email afterwards, will be reviewed by CARB and considered in the staff report before it goes to the May board meeting. So that's coming up in just over a month's time. And also because more communities will be undergoing this process, and the more we know, the better we can get, right? We're always learning. Oh, it looks like we have a broken link. Sasha was just trying the web link for the community. It's showing up as not found. So maybe I can ask Liliana to try to find that again. Edith, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to raise my hand when Crystal from enforcement from CARB asked the question. Crystal's been great. She's been participating in most of our CSC meetings, but I think there was one item where it would be great to get more information about you. I think it was Nikki in our CSC when we were kind of all discussing I think there was a truck yard with a number of vehicles kind of waiting to enter or pick up or discharge some of their cargo. I think this is the first time I had heard of the kind of that California Clean Idle sticker. I don't know if you remember, Crystal, but it would be great to maybe have some additional follow-up on what that program, because just based on my limited understanding, it seems that there's still a lot of diesel trucks that just get to have the sticker and continue to idle and continue to pollute. But that was just one additional comment that I had for you, Crystal.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Edith. Yeah, we are thinking about, as we're implementing, right, how we can best keep the CSC updated. So I'll definitely put that on the list so that everyone understands what's going on in the wonderful world of idling. And we're finishing up the truck idling flyer now for distribution. So hopefully that'll be clarifying for any of the truckers as well. We can, yeah, good. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Crystal. We're right at time. And so I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening and contributing your thoughts and your feedback. And I would also like to invite Director Reyes for any thank you or closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Megan. This was so helpful to hear directly from community members and the Air District, South Coast, and in terms of informing our understanding of what matters to you, what you value about this process, and what we in CARB can do better. Thank you all so very, very much, and we will be in touch with updates about what happens with our board. And we hope that you also decide to attend that board meeting if you so choose.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We can keep the meeting going for just 1 or 2 more minutes in case folks want to extract some of the hyperlinks from the chat box.
Great idea.
Thanks. And enjoy a delicious dinner. I'm sure everyone's
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.